Record. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me clearly? Make sure. All right. Awesome. Thanks. It's good to have everyone here. Wonderful names, people from all parts of the continent and beyond, and different time zones. Thank you for making the time to join us this evening for this event. Wonderful to have Michael back again, speaking with us for the second time this year. Second of many, we hope. Today we're covering AI and machine learning and how to future-proof your BA career. Michael comes to us from SPK and Associates, and we're just chatting about what a wonderful job he has and all the interesting stuff he has to, he's exposed to dealing with right now, developing, working with, and all of that stuff. So maybe he'll chime in and tell us some of it in the course of his presentation, but we'll look forward to that exciting part of it. Just a few housekeeping items before we hand over. I'm making an introduction now, and then we'll hand over to Robert very quickly, or Mr. Roberts rather. And then we would like to take the questions towards the end of the session so that Michael has time to go through all of his presentation, but be kind to drop the questions in the chat. If Michael does ask for questions when he's done or in the course of it, just to keep some interaction, then by all means, please ask your questions at that time. But if not, please just keep them in the chat and then we'll be happy to get through them right after the presentation. At the end of it, we'll go through a few items like, membership with IBA and any upcoming events we have, and then how to connect with the chapter. Just a quick intro. Michael has been with us before. He has decades of experience in the software and IT as a whole industry and strategic operations. He just left ASP not too long ago, where he was the director of customer engagement, which was also C Prime prior to that. He's currently the VP of Sales and Marketing for SPK and Associates. Has some amazing speaking experience under his belt in so many different seminars, IBA chapters, and the wealth of knowledge that he shares with every single one of us every time. So we're excited to have him this evening, and we hope that everyone who's listening and who ends up watching this presentation again at a later time enjoys the wealth of knowledge that Michael will hand over to us. At this point, I will give the mic over to him so he has well more than the allotted time to speak. All right, Michael, the floor is yours. You can take over the presentation.
Thanks, Nosa. I gotta say, now I have a lot to live up to. This is that's a glowing intro. So thank you very much for that. Let me see if I can piece together some semblance of organization to give you guys some information to live up to that really high praise. So as Nosa said, we're here to talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that dichotomy, or how that technology can intersect with what business analysts do, and to prepare yourself for the future. And I've given this talk for maybe almost a year now, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I got to say, I've actually seen stuff that I've talked about actually be used and propel folks into kind of a different mode of thinking and spinning themselves up and positioning themselves for the future. So hopefully it'll do the same for you if that's why you came, and we'll kind of talk through that. Just a little bit about me. I live in North Carolina, and there's some certifications. That's not, all of me though. I hate showing stuff like this. So I like to talk a little bit about where I'm from and those type of things. So as I talked about previously, that Valerie was in Newark, Delaware. I was in Newark a lot in my life. I was born in Westchester, and I grew up in a small town outside of Philadelphia. That means most folks, because Philly has a reputation for not necessarily having the nicest of people. And sometimes that creates a stigma. So if you're one of those people that doesn't like people from Philly, I apologize on behalf of all people from Eastern Pennsylvania. Part of the reason why I'm not there today is because I decided to play baseball in college, and I came south. And in the process of coming south, I learned that I do not like snow and ice. This is me pre-COVID, having to go to Madison, Wisconsin the week after the polar vortex. I am not built for that type of cold weather. I want to say that it was single digits there at that time, and that was middle of the day. I was not a happy camper. So that's why I live in the South. When I was still in college, I got a relatively entry-level job with a small startup company called AIT, Advanced Internet Technologies. I was the 18th employee in the company, and we grew very rapidly to over 260 people. And the core of what that company did was manage a data center and a lot of managed and self-managed web hosting and other services that went along with that, like domain registration and web design and those type of things. Over my 19 years there, I was in many different positions. I started out as an entry-level tech support person. And for probably, I'll say 10 to 12 of those 19 years, I was a corporate officer, either as the CIO or COO of the company, which meant I had to run and have my hands in everything. So from a technology perspective, I learned a lot about things there. I learned a lot about managing projects and products. And also, I didn't realize it until years later that I was actually doing a lot of BA work by gathering requirements and elicitation and those type of things. So a lot of my experience actually comes from those days. I have an 8-year-old little girl who loves to play hockey. She's actually part of the Junior Canes girls team. She actually had practice tonight. She's shoving food in so she can get to bed on time. And so a lot of my time is spent at rinks on the weekend. Being from Philly, I'm a Philly sports fan, Sixers and Phillies for sure, not an Eagles fan. Long story there. I'm a Bucks fan and have been since the 90s. Obviously, because the Canes subsidize some of my daughter's ice time and equipment. I am a Canes fan and will be for quite a long time because they've helped me keep money in my pocket. So that's me. The other thing you need to know about me is I love memes, and especially with the days of virtual presentations, and hopefully Francesca will be wide awake at 1 a.m. Because of the funny memes that I throw into this presentation. So hopefully you get a chuckle out of some of the things that we'll talk about today. Here's generally what we're going to talk about. I'll give a little bit of a definition for AI and machine learning and kind of the differences between the two. And then I want to talk a little bit about tools, and I'll tell you why when we get there. And then we're going to put everybody to the test. I would actually like to give everybody a quiz on real world AI and machine learning projects that they've seen or interacted with and never knew that they were AI or machine learning. And then we'll talk about what you can do and the skills you can take away from this conversation and what you can do to future-proof your career. So if everybody could, I would love it if you could in the chat, just put what made you come today. Francesca, if it's insomnia, that's fine. Whatever the reason is fine. I had somebody tell me at a conference once, well, my friends are in here, so I just decided to come to this talk. So that's okay. It won't hurt my feelings if you just decided to come because you get some CDU out of it or something. I won't be upset. Data projects. Okay. Yeah, that's a reason for sure. I came because Stephanie made me. Okay. Thank you, Stephanie, for bringing Eric. More knowledge. Okay. Cool. Cool. Thank you for that, guys. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some of the things that you were looking for, the reasons why you came. So again, in the chat, if you guys don't mind throwing in if you have done an AI or machine learning project in your current roles or past roles. Okay. Okay, Valerie was involved in an AI project. Okay. And I would say that's probably common. In the audiences that I give this talk to, I'd say, there's 2, 3, 4 people that have some level of experience with a artificial intelligence or a machine learning project. So they can usually provide a little bit of context as we move on. So I want to preface this, and this is a real thing. People see artificial intelligence and they think robots or Skynet or a human brain living in a bubble with water in it and a robot body. And that's really not what artificial intelligence means. I think to understand the future and the technologies that AI and machine learning can actually provide us with, you have to understand the past and some of these big broad stroke type technologies. So let's provide some non-AI context and things that we're all kind of used to. Now, something I ran across many years ago doing some research, I found out that back in the early 1900s, as factories were being built in America, no factory was built without its own power plant. So every factory that was made to build something had its own power plant. And on Friday, when all the workers left, they shut the power down to the entire facility. That warehouse or that building did not have power because it had its own sustainable power source that they ran, that the company would run. And obviously, as we all know, that was not a long-lived thing. And now today there are public services that do energy and utilities. So you can subscribe to it. You pay a certain amount per amount of power that you get. And that's how we all get our power, whether that's commercial or residential. It would be very strange to go, oh yeah, I'm building a factory and also I'm building a power plant next to it. That's just not how the day is run. And there was a reason for this. Everybody kind of went, hey, everybody needs it. Why don't we all just kind of pitch in and create this thing? That way all of our costs go down and it's a little bit smarter in the long run from a subscription utility perspective. So much like that, fast forward to the 90s, this is not a picture of a data center that I managed. Maybe we looked a little bit like this from time to time. But as businesses in the 90s were expanding, they had some computer room, switch closet, whatever, that equipment just kind of started naturally just going into. And Cat5 cables started going everywhere and everything needed to be connected. You end up with stuff like this. And part of that thought process was, oh, we have to have something to do whatever work, and that technology needs to reside in the office building that we're in. Fast forward in today, we don't think twice about using a software as a service model or a platform as a service model, things that are not in our office, things that are not in our homes, that we connect to and we work every day. And think about the tools that you use and the sites that you use. These are all in the cloud, so to speak. They're not managed by your IT group in a physical closet down the hall. It doesn't make sense to do that anymore. There's so many efficiencies that can be gained by having that technology managed by people that do that 24/7, as opposed to you having to do it. And who wants to come in on a Friday night when the thing goes down and people are going to work on the weekend? Nobody wants to do that. So why not, work with a service that does that, like different cloud providers and infrastructure providers that offer these things as a service. So understanding those paradigms, think about how data is captured, entered, managed today. And this is really where, if you understand, the way that the business that you work with works, that there are spreadsheets upon spreadsheets someplace, and there's databases upon databases and all that. There's so much different stuff that is all over the place. How is that aggregated? How is that working to make the business better? And I'm not talking about, some reports. I'm talking about real analysis, looking at millions of entries in a data set. What's really happening to make that new paradigm for certain jobs or certain industries to be completely revolutionized, like the power industry and the technology industry were. All right, so let's give some definitions to this thing we called artificial intelligence. Most of us probably have a Google Assistant or an Amazon Alexa in our house. I did develop this talk pre-COVID because this slide was actually supposed to talk about how you could reserve a table at a restaurant without actually talking to anybody, just talking to your Google virtual assistant. Then COVID hit and nobody was allowed to sit in a restaurant. So I feel like that feature and that explanation didn't really resonate anymore. But I digress. Now today it's a little different, and you probably could go back to that. But the concept for Google and Amazon and the others that have similar devices and similar things was to make the data and usage of the data that is available make it easier for a human to do a thing. And in this case, reserve a table at a restaurant. There's enough data and different data sets that are available to be able to do that. And I think this is really powerful because it shows how AI is being used for the consumer, but it doesn't necessarily talk about, from a business perspective, how those things are being used. So the thing I like to do when I talk about AI is talk about, let's break it down to its most simplistic of things. It's an if statement, right? And if you're familiar with the Sinafin framework, and it's a Welsh word, it means habitat or place of multiple belongings. It really doesn't translate exactly to the explanation, but basically it's a quadrant, and in that quadrant you have simple, complicated, complex, and chaos. And you have to find out where a certain activity or a certain process really sits. So in the case of artificial intelligence, you're trying to address something that is complicated, but it's not complex. At the end of the day, it's complicated. You can create rules and a plan and a path to be able to do something with the data. It's not like you're having to abstract and you're having to hopefully think of what somebody thinks. There's actually zeros and ones in some file somewhere that it can read and determine patterns. And so that's kind of where artificial intelligence starts for me, is that type of thing. So what would a business use artificial intelligence for? So the first kind of basic thing was automate business processes that are time consuming and nobody wants to do. Totally get that. I love the use of something like that. But it's also used to gain real true insight to these large data sets, right? Not just process something so somebody doesn't have to do it, but look through millions or billions of records and come back with, hey, there's a pattern here. And if these 2 or 3 things happen, then this is the output, this is the outcome. And that insight is really, really powerful. Imagine if you had that in your role, in your job, if you could find the patterns through large data sets that you just don't have the time or effort to go through. And then the ultimate, kind of outcome-ish thing here with those 2 things is you're trying to engage your customers and your employees better. So that's kind of the outcome of what AI can provide. And here's some pretty cool facts about AI that I love, because it just sets up the rest of this conversation, right? So AI is old. It's 40 years old. There's only about 10,000 people that are doing serious AI work, and I use the air quotes because what is do AI work? But actually building AI applications and implementing them. Only 23% of companies have actually deployed AI, and then only 4 are actually doing substantive state-of-the-art AI, which kind of tells you, like, big market, lots of opportunity there, right? And then 54% either have no plans to deploy AI or have not begun what they planned. Now that sounds like most of the companies that I've talked to and worked with over the years. They're not the leaders in the industry necessarily, right? They're a little bit of middle of the road or laggard. And then this is the one that kind of tells me all those like, hey, the market's not ripe yet. But when entrepreneurs are putting their money in creating startups around AI, that tells you that the curve is coming. And this is kind of the beginning of that time where AI is really going to start to take off 14 times more than in the last 20 years. So what does that mean for you? I love to say that if I had to share a story about my life and my history, the turning point for me, the cool part for me being, a baseball coach or being in the technology realm was a class I took in college where I just happened to get linked up with a professor who knew the original founders at AIT. And that's kind of how I ended up getting in there. And I said to them at one point, I said, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, but I know it's with computers and the internet. Now, this is in the 90s. If you were around in the 90s, having a computer meant, you had AOL or Prodigy to look up scores and stuff. It really wasn't something that businesses used, but I knew that there was a lot of potential there. And I knew that I wanted to be a part of that potential. And so I see the same thing here with AI and machine learning. Because there's only a certain number of companies that have actually started implementing this stuff, it really gives you the opportunity to be a leader in the space or be a be a thought leader when it comes to AI and machine learning. And that gives you the ability to grow, which I think is a really exciting opportunity to learn something new and be kind of a thought leader in that space over time. This is probably as technical as I'm going to get in this talk. I'll just give you something that you can research a little bit more in terms of AI. And these are the three different types of AI. There's narrow intelligence, strong AGI, and super intelligence. And AGI is what most people think of when they think of artificial intelligence. We're not quite there yet. It's not Rosie the robot from the Jetsons. That's kind of what people think about when they talk about strong AGI, is that level of like a robot that can think on their own. But there's other types of artificial intelligence too that actually provide really, really cool benefits. What I want to break artificial intelligence down a little bit into what's the business goal of actually investing time, effort, and energy into building something that has AI built into it. So if we look at this graph here, going from left to right, you want to be able to describe what happened, which is usually very reactive, and then why it happened. You want to explain why it happened, but then eventually, how do I get to do predictive analytics? How can I tell what will happen? And then how can I actually move the lever to make the thing happen that I want? That's prescriptive. That's where most businesses eventually want to be. They want to move the business levers in order for them to get more market share, or to sell more product, or to retain more customers, or to make employees happier. They want to figure out what those levers are so that they can move the right ones at the right time. And that's kind of the race right now, is how can you figure out what all those levers are? I have another talk that's related to data and this topic, where the reason why some successful people and executives and businesses have been successful is because, they trusted their gut. Well, their gut probably was founded in a little bit of data, and they just got lucky, is really what it is. But prescriptive analytics, really moving those levers to make sure that you're successful, that's really where the success comes from. Okay, so here's a quick summary of AI before we move on to machine learning. So it exhibits intelligence, it shows some abstract thinking and context, and it's much broader than machine learning, which we'll get to here in a second. Okay, so that's kind of what artificial intelligence is. Now let's talk about machine learning, which is a whole different thing, although people lump it together. So here's the textbook definition, right? It's a subset of AI. The goal is to enable computers to learn on their own. Machine learning algorithms enable it to identify patterns and observe data, build models that explain the world, and predict the things will happen. And I always love to give, really simple examples of this. This is an example of machine learning. Not even close. Oh, it's 121. Okay, got it. I've learned that now. I've gotten it wrong, and now I've been corrected, and now I know that to be a truth. And that's really all machine learning does. And we'll talk about some examples of how bad it can be. But here's the general concept: is the machine learning application is in the middle, a data set is pushed to it, and then it knows a thing. And there's usually a data set that is used to have it learn, and then there's a data set that it's going to test. So you have to have a lot of data in order to be able to get the machine learning algorithm to do the right thing. Now, there is a machine learning algorithm, both for Android and iPhone, that's called Is It a Hot Dog? And you would take a picture of a hot dog or something that isn't a hot dog, and it could tell you, based upon the picture, if it's a hot dog or not. And I decided to use ice cream in this case. Now, is this machine learning algorithm going to understand if it was ice cream or if it was caulk on a cone? Like, it's not going to know the molecular configuration of what's on that cone. It looks like ice cream, but it doesn't really know, right? So this is where machine learning is a little bit dumb, I guess. And so you have things like this where you have premature machine learning, and it doesn't really understand the real true context because it doesn't have enough data to learn from. And so you get this really weird thing of pattern matching in machine learning, that the pattern could be great and the pattern could be accurate, but like in this case, the pattern's not. So let's give some context to the machine learning definitions here. So it's not creative and it doesn't show abstract thinking, unlike artificial intelligence. It is really impressive at a particular thing. Like, could it figure out, is it a hot dog or not? Absolutely. And I've actually used the app, and man, it's freaking good. But at the end of the day, it doesn't know, if it's a beef hot dog or a pork hot dog, right? Because there's certain things that it can't do. It doesn't have the ability to think like a human. And because of that, it could fail. And that could lead to a lot of wrong assumptions, going down the wrong road, making bad decisions based upon what machine learning can do. So essentially, mass pattern recognition, it can find patterns. It doesn't necessarily tell you what those patterns mean or what actions to take, but it can tell you that there's patterns there. But what people are doing is they're taking these really complex machine learning algorithms and they're putting them together to make essentially a neural network. And if you're not familiar with the phrase neural network, it's essentially a way of doing really deep learning. It's modeled after how the brain works. And you're just pushing a set of inputs, and then it propagates through the network of all these different decision trees. And it can be tweaked and trained based upon feedback. And this, this type of application of machine learning is really where there's a very slight difference now between companies that are doing actual full artificial intelligence and some that are just doing a bunch of machine learning applications that are strung together to create this neural network. So essentially nothing more than an if-else statement, which allows all these different attributes to be looked at and insight gained. In the course of developing this, I ran across, this is probably the week, I think, that I was making this talk. There was a Vice News little show on this Stanford University experiment, essentially that between the Stanford University and the hospital there, that they were looking at these AI and deep learning algorithms to look at 10,000 cases of pneumonia and non-pneumonia, these MRIs, and looking at these MRIs to determine, do they have pneumonia or not? Now, the cool thing about this is it was kind of touting that the Stanford University deep learning thing determined with 81% accuracy when somebody had a pneumonia. And that was actually 2% better than the radiologist during that same time frame. So the machine that had been built to look at these images was actually better at diagnosing pneumonia than the radiologists that were trained for years to be able to do it. And so Jeffrey Hinton, who was considered the godfather of deep learning, said that people are supposed to stop training radiologists because in 5 years it'll be obsolete. Now, of course, Vice News being Vice News, they had the other side of the equation. And there was a doctor from Mass General who said, yeah, there's a fear, but that's a very limited view because radiologists do more than just that. And I think this is where a lot of fear comes from when it comes to mentioning artificial intelligence and machine learning. People start to go, well, is my job in jeopardy? And I think there's a couple things that we'll talk about later on about how you can position yourself to have skills that go well beyond, like the radiologist in this case. And the point that the doctor was making here is, yeah, that's part of what they do is they look at these images, but there are so many other things that are part of their job. And that just allows them to be able to be a lot more efficient at that part of their job, but they can spend more time doing the other things that they do. Okay. So that's kind of the AI and machine learning context. So I want to talk tools for a second. Usually I don't like talking tools when we talk concepts, but I think there's some value in everybody hearing the tools that are out there. So that way, you know what to listen for internally when parts of your organization are doing something that maybe you're not involved in. But if you hear that they're using that tool, you can kind of, inject yourself a little bit to find out a little bit more. So one of the most common ones is TensorFlow, and it uses mostly Python scripts, although there's a couple other supported applications that you can use or scripting languages that you can use. But that's a very common one, very popular one. You'll also hear, Google has their version of it in Google Cloud for machine learning, as does Amazon. There's an Accord.NET extension as well. Shogun's another, Apache from an open source perspective, they have theirs. Microsoft there for a while. it was all that I could do on TV was see a Microsoft AI commercial. They really pushed that early on last year. And then another one that I find has been very valuable for some customers that I've worked with over the years is BigML. They actually have a platform and services, and you can kind of the pay as you go or pay as you use model, which several of these other ones do. But the cool part about this one was the people that were using this, the engineers that were using BigML, they had these test projects that they were doing, which had allowed them to scale up, use it for a month or two, and then scale back and then stop using it. So it wasn't like there was a huge investment. They were subscription based. So it made it very easy for these small teams to be able to do some tests, come back, report back, and then figure out what their next moves were. It was a very easy, scalable way to get into machine learning. Okay, so it's quiz time. So I'm going to ask that as I start to describe these next upcoming projects and use cases, that you guys actually give me the answer to what you think these things are. Is it artificial intelligence or is it machine learning? Now, if you're like me and have traveled a ton, you've probably used Uber or Lyft before. Obviously, the calculations of how much the ride is and how long it's going to be are there. There's pretty static things. I think there's that ride price, there's the wait time and the drive time. So do we think this is artificial intelligence or machine learning? And go ahead and put your answers in the chat. Couple AIs, couple MLs. It is machine learning, and it's machine learning because it doesn't care if the sky is gray or if it's a Tuesday versus a Wednesday. It's not really looking at all, the things that don't matter. It's looking at very specific things, and those things really don't change. Available drivers, the ride price based upon that, the wait time, the drive time. All right, so Autopilot, I didn't know this until I created this, was actually dates back to 1914. And I had to put an asterisk there because the more I read it, the more I was like, yeah, okay, that you can say that, but I'm not getting on a plane in 1914 with Autopilot on it. I think that may have just been a rubber band or something around the steering wheel. And the average flight involves only 7 minutes of human steered flight. So do we think this is artificial intelligence or machine learning? For all you saying machine learning, I don't ever want to get on a plane that is doing machine learning autopilot, because once something happens, I don't want to mess around. I don't want to be in that. I don't want to be in that plane. Yeah, that's definitely an AI application. All right, interesting one here. We're all impacted by this. Our mail filters. The typical, simple filters don't work because, when the spammers started sending Viagra in the subject line, everybody blocked the word Viagra. So then what did they do? They replaced the I with a 1. And then they put spaces in the word so that humans could read it, but it wasn't a word to the machine, right? So simple filters aren't going to be able to figure out what that is. And so spam filters have evolved over the years. They've actually built scores based upon certain types of trends and things that they see. It looks at the message and the message data, not just the message itself. So what do you think, AI or machine learning? That one's actually machine or AI. And simply because, the early days were probably more machine learning, but now it actually has to look at so many different data points that it actually determines on the fly whether it's spam or not. This is one that I'm so thankful that exists. That way I don't have to go to the bank anymore. I just take a picture of a check if I have it. And this technology was created by a company called MyTech for OCR and handwriting. They were trying to convert handwriting into text, computer text, and that created this whole new potential for AI and machine learning to allow checks to be input directly into your bank account just from taking a picture. So what do we think? Do we think this is AI or machine learning? And I'll give you a hint here. You can't be wrong. because it's both. It's actually both. Part of the handwriting capabilities are artificial intelligence, because it doesn't know how people are actually going to write. So it has to be able to interpret things on the fly. But in terms of numbers on the check and very simple things that are pretty consistent standard across all checks, there's machine learning algorithms in that as well. This was a cool project that I worked with some clients on a couple of years ago. They had a lot of their HR data was stored in an Amazon S3 bucket. If you're not familiar with Amazon's S3 technology, it's nothing more than a shared drive, if you will, just a place to store data. And they had a policy that you can review yours, and your supervisor, whoever your direct supervisor is, can review your HR data, but nobody else should be able to review anybody else's HR data outside of that. And each time something was accessed, there was a log, and that log was formatted pretty straightforward, who accessed what at what time, and who their direct reports are, and those things. So it was all together in one log file. So they were creating a kind of a technology that would allow them to red flag something. Oh, somebody that is not somebody's supervisor reviewed their HR file, and red flag it. So do we think this is artificial intelligence or machine learning? It is machine learning. And it's machine learning from the standpoint of that log file doesn't change. It doesn't matter if the weather is sunny or rainy. It's that same format's always going to be there. Another pretty cool project that I was involved in. So this was a financial services company, and they pulled down all the trade data and changes in price for crypto. They were ultimately, this is early in the crypto days, they were trying to detect any anomalies, market changes, things like that, so that they could have a competitive advantage. They looked at millions of lines of data pretty much daily to determine what the change is, what the impact was, and try to find some trends. So do we think this is artificial intelligence or machine learning? Another hint, you can't get this one wrong either. This one's both. Artificial intelligence from the standpoint of lots of things impact, like government, elections and world trade policy changes and all those things. So there are things outside of the data points that impact. But from a machine learning perspective, you're looking for trends. You're looking, is it a hot dog or is it not, right? And just patterning those things together. So this is another financial services company, and I liked this one because of the amount of data. So think about downloading the Bloomberg financial data with stock price and trade data and trending and all that, which was 25 million rows of data per day, and trying to sift through that to make predictions and come up with things that their customers needed to be aware of. So this was a company that was using a technology called Snowflake. If you're not familiar with Snowflake, it's a very extensible data analysis tool, which can support large data sets like this. So do we think this was AI or machine learning? Some of you are starting to figure it out with the both thing. It is both. Yeah, there's a lot of this is, as I mentioned in the previous one, is AI, but there's some very simple machine learning algorithms that have to be applied to look for trends and those type of things. Okay, so let's move to some recommendations and some things that you guys can really take away from here. So this gentleman, Kaifu Lee, if you're not familiar with the name, he's a businessman based out of Beijing. He was actually the world's first speaker-independent continuous speech recognition systems thesis at Carnegie Mellon. He's worked for Apple and Microsoft and Google, you name it. His resume is well documented from a technology perspective. But he gave an interview on 60 Minutes, maybe 4 years ago, something like that. And he actually made this statement, and there was a lot of people that were kind of up in arms about this. Artificial intelligence will automate and potentially eliminate 40% of jobs within 15 years. Now, this scares me because I'll probably still be working in 15 years, and I don't want my job to be eliminated. But that little excerpt was really just part of the bigger statement. And what he was saying in this, I'll paraphrase here, is that nobody wants to listen to a robot making speeches, leading a company, and giving pep talks. What they want is these empathetic jobs like teachers and nurses. That those things are going to become extremely more valuable over the course of time. And yeah, we'll automate the things that we can automate, but robots and AI and machine learning are not going to take things over. We're just going to use that the same way that we used power differently, the same way that we used data services differently. Data will be used differently in the future, and we're still going to have to be human, which I think positions business analysts really well. This is actually from LinkedIn, their LinkedIn Learning top skills that companies need in 2020. And I feel like they may have put 2021 out yet. I have not noticed it yet. But notice business analysis is number 6, up 4 spots from the previous year. And look where artificial intelligence is. It's number 4, and it was number 2 the previous year. So I think this kind of trend shows that, yeah, these technology things are great, but we really need people that can figure out requirements, that can figure out what opportunities we have, that can figure out what we need to do and when we need to do it and who needs to do it. And that doesn't come from a robot. That comes from humans and understanding when to do those things and when not. It doesn't mean that we can't use machine learning and artificial intelligence to find some of the things out, but there's so much more that's human about what BAs do. So the good thing is, I don't think any BA is in danger of, they're losing their job because it's getting automated. Look at the numbers here. 54% have no plans or haven't implemented things, and only 23% have actually implemented it. And then, can you start to think of things that you can do in your own job with a machine learning algorithm? What could it make your job easier to do, or your team's job easier to do? So start to think about, how can we start to use this now at a very small scale? And then really, in terms of, future advice, I would say you need to start preparing now, because in 5 years, the landscape's going to look a lot different, I think. Start to look at any machine learning or AI project your company has and try to be involved in it. Ask around. This is why I gave you guys some of the tools that you'll hear. You can start to ask developers, hey, are you guys working on these tools? And start to listen and find out what's going on, and can you be involved, even if it's just to learn, nothing more than that. I would invest some time getting some training and reading and learn whether you like those type of books or not. I would spend some time and effort there. And then as you start to learn things, you can start to make recommendations in your own organization. How can you use AI and machine learning to make your job or your team or the organization at whole more efficient? And over the years, I've read a couple of these, and they're really good, I think, placeholders for understanding and learning more than what I did today. The Machine Learning for Absolute Beginners is it's not one of the dummies series, but it kind of explains things just like that. To Be a Machine, I think, is a little bit farther along in that conversation. And then if you're into VCR instructions, that hands-on machine learning with TensorFlow is a good book if you're like to actually get your hands on it and start doing it. I'm working with SPK and Associates. Just a quick tidbit about what they do. They've been in business over 20 years. They have a lot of long-standing clients, mostly in the med device space. They're a woman-owned certified business, and we do lots of work with both physical product and software product, and in a lot of cases like med devices where those two things come together. We have 4 pillars of the services that we offer our clients. Product lifecycle management, so that's your physical product type world. Software lifecycle management, that's the software most of us are very used to and what we do there. Lots of cloud and lots of data engineering, as we've talked about the whole AI and machine learning thing here tonight. And I'll leave you with one of the little case studies that we did for a med device company in 2021. This was a pretty unique challenge. They had a new CFO, and they were not very happy about the profitability of the company, and they really weren't understanding, why that was, because the reports that they were given, the profitability should have been so much better. So because we had a lot of understanding of all the different data repositories, and they were trying to get all this reporting from all these different places, and it really wasn't jiving. So we created a data warehouse for them that had structured data so that they could pull reports a lot more simply. They ended up finding the anomalies in the business from those reports. They were able to create reports on the fly because that wasn't really something they could do previously. They improved their existing reporting by about tenfold because they didn't have to wait months or weeks to get a report created. And then they ended up actually increasing their profitability by 8% over just 6 months, because then they could see the data that they were, what the business was actually doing, as opposed to what they were seeing before, which it was just very blurry and inaccurate. Okay, so that is the talk for this evening. I think we got some time for some questions, if you guys have questions, and I'll leave this slide up that has my LinkedIn on it. So if you want to, or and my email, if you want to connect with me that way, please feel free to do that.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think I already said that Michael was going to kill it tonight, and he did. I hope everyone is excited as I am with the topic, with the content, and all the new stuff that we're learning. So it's time for questions. If you have any questions in the chat. If not, feel free to please speak up, actually. I don't see any in the chat, so I think we're going to take the questions from them. Now, there has to be questions. Michael just told us that our job might need some fine-tuning in 5 years, so.
Okay, Randy's got a good one. Any advice on convincing leadership, it scrolled, that is worthwhile to use AI internally for process improvement and meeting business outcomes? Okay, that's a great one. So short answer is, I believe you have to have a data-oriented culture, a data-oriented leader, to have any value in getting something like that implemented. If you have leadership that is the trust your gut person, and because they've done it for X amount of years, then it's going to be very hard to convince them. But I think if you have a data-oriented culture and people that are very logical, and you can show them some level of data that says, I mean, use some of the stats that I have here. Companies that are more successful have invested in those type of things, and there's plenty of case studies and research out there that supports businesses that are doing those things internally to look at quality or customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction, end up doing better. So I would start there. That would be where I'd start. How best to elevate my BA skills with machine learning and AI? Stephanie, I would say, like I mentioned there, there's some learning that you'll probably want to do. Just inherently, you want to, whether it's something as simple as some Udemy videos, or you go buy a book or two. I think that's a great place to start, because then you'll find out very quickly, is this something I'm passionate about, or is this like VCR instructions to me? I don't even want to get into this. If you really want to elevate from that point, I think that's really the catalyst where you can start to have conversations with people that you work with and start to go, hey, what AI or machine learning projects do we have? What are we doing in that realm? I want to be involved. And inevitably, you'll either find out that your company has a couple places that you're doing work like that, or that you're doing nothing like that. And maybe you have the idea of how to start addressing some of the challenges that you see. So I think that's the way it's kind of a stepping stone. You have to really educate yourself first to understand, is this something you want to do? And is this giving you fulfillment?
I think there's the question on how best to elevate my BA skills with ML and AI. From students.
Yeah, that was the one. I think that was the one I just answered.
Oh, okay, all right. And then the next one is AI and ML costly to a firm?
In a general statement, I would say no. Now, also defines what you think costly is. If you're talking about just like in monetary investment, absolutely not. There, like I mentioned, that BigML platform and several of the other ones. You don't have to buy the software. It's not like the old days of, I have to buy the software, I have to put it on some infrastructure. And now we've invested, thousands of dollars on that to produce nothing yet. Now we got to start the work. Where some of these, platforms like BigML are really cool is you just buy a plan and it's $20 for the basic plan or $5 for the basic plan, and you use it and you kind of start automating and testing. And if you need to upgrade, you upgrade, but it's a very scalable entrance to doing AI and machine learning. So no, it's not super costly. If you look at the time of engineers to do it, you could probably argue, oh, we're spending thousands of dollars a day just for one person to do that. But I don't think that's super costly when you look at what that return can be. Any other questions? Oh, here's a good one. Okay. For business analysts working with teams to implement features and requirements in the realm of AI or machine learning, what advice would you have for them when it comes to requirement quality and collaborating effectively with stakeholders, developers, and any noteworthy challenges to be aware of? Okay, so Randy, that's a good question. And I think at the end of the day, the same advice would be given if you were creating a desktop application, a web application, mobile application. I look at AI and machine learning as just another one of those. Yes, there are requirement differences and things like that. But at the end of the day, you could run it almost like any other project. There may be some nuances, specifically things like if you're doing something with machine learning is, do we have that data set already? And is that data accurate? If we believe the data is accurate and you have that data set already, not a problem. If you don't, then maybe the first step of that project is to put something in place so that you can get that data and let it collect over time and then come back and do some machine learning on that. But I think the only thing that would be different would be you'll probably talk a little bit more about data sets and the locations of that data. That's probably the only major difference. How would get on the buzzwords to gain stakeholder buy-in, build the right team, and deliver business value? Okay, Benedict, if I could do that, I would go start a company that would sell that advice for millions of dollars a year. So going beyond the buzzwords is hard to do with anything, right? And as I mentioned before, I don't think you're convincing a highest paid person's opinion, that person. I don't think you're convincing the hippo to do something in the machine learning and data realm if they're not thinking about their company being a data-driven or data-driven culture, having a data-driven culture. They have to be bought into that. That's not something you can do directly. I think they have to have a general understanding of what the value is. And there's enough statistics out there. Each industry is a little different, but there's enough statistics out there to show, businesses that actually spend time and effort on these things do get results out of it. The problem is there's a lot of companies that are selling vaporware and stuff like that, it's created maybe a little bit of bad name because obviously not everybody's doing AI. But there's a reason why, because they just haven't found the real need for it yet, but there absolutely will be. The more data that's being collected by enterprises, the more data that they're not actually using, some of those questions will start to rise. Hey, we're capturing this, but what are we doing with it? Well, this is how you can start to use that data and gain better insights. Phrase I like to ask a lot is, what are you doing with all the data that you collect? And a lot of times the answer is, I don't know. So to me, that's where you start to talk about the realm of possible. Well, what if we analyze that and we're able to tell the top 4 trends or top 8 trends that our customers or visitors or users or whatever have, what could we do with that? And then people start to kind of ask the right questions, I think. But you have to have somebody that's willing to at least entertain having that conversation. Any more questions? Some really good questions, guys. Really good.
I think so too, and really good answers. So thank you, Michael.
Can I clarify the difference between data science, data engineering, AI, machine learning, and what kind of skills are required for those different areas? Okay. Data science. Data scientists, in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, are usually really, really smart. Probably some of the smartest people on earth are usually data scientists, especially with companies in the financial and insurance industries, because you got to think their products are not physical, they're more digital, and they're more conceptual. So they're using a lot, they're basically banking the business on the data scientists or multiple data scientists, their view of how to make money, and what their risk assessment is, and what they can afford to spend. Like all those things really rely on data science, and that is hardcore math algorithms, not just what's this column say in an Excel document. Like they're doing some serious algorithms. So that level is completely different than data engineering. Data engineering are data engineers are people that transform data. They use ETL. They use they're responsible for the data architecture and the data locations inside of the company, but they are not doing the math algorithms to determine what should we charge $4.50 or should we charge $4.75? What's the profitability on each of those if we change our model, right? There's so much to be looked at from the data science perspective. There's probably 1% of the United States has somebody that could be a data scientist. It's a pretty in-demand skill set. Whereas data engineers, I'll give you a great example. A company that I've worked with in the past, they bring in anywhere from 20 to 50 data engineers into the company every year coming out of college. And most of those college graduates have a really good foundation of data engineering. So they're not your typical data entry people. They are more engineering related, but they are not data scientists. I would say very few people could come out of college and be a data scientist. So that's the difference between those two. And then in terms of AI and machine learning, with respect to those two, the algorithms that the data scientist is writing, that's what goes into AI and machine learning. Data engineering are usually the people that execute the AI and machine learning implementations, but the data scientist is the one that has the algorithm that is going to be used. That gives you an explanation. How does AI and machine learning deliver insights and foresights differently? So machine learning is never going to give you something that is predictive. It can tell you what that data says, and you could assume that you can apply that same thing to the future. Like, I'll give you a great example. The data that I just reviewed said that I should open up a restaurant, and I should have tons of in my restaurant seating, and I should pack as many tables as I can into that restaurant. Given COVID, that's probably not a wise business move. The data can tell you historically what may be a good idea in the future, but it's not a guarantee. Artificial intelligence, if it's built right, it could tell you and show you that trend over time and allow you to see that change potentially before it becomes a big impact on the business you're going to create or whatever. So AI has a little bit of ability to show prediction, whereas machine learning is just going to tell you what the data said and give you some potential outcomes. But that's where, when I was pointing out that machine learning is kind of dumb, that's the difference. Artificial intelligence, true AI, is going to be really, really smart to handle these very small nuances where machine learning won't. It'll just throw it into the equation and it's either yes or no. And it's not really going to do a lot of extensive evaluation. It doesn't think critically. Cool. Great questions, gang. This was awesome. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the knowledge. And thank you very much to everyone and the questions. This was a very wonderful session, highly interactive, and we appreciate that. We'll close out here with just a few quick highlights. Let's hide this. All right, so we already know the IBA core certifications, ECBA, CCBA, and CBAP. You could never, point that out enough, but we also know the specialization certifications. Maybe one of these days, IBA will have a machine learning or AI certification for us for BAs. But right now, we just have the cybersecurity, agile analysis, the data analytics, and the CPOA. And all of these are available. More information on them on the IBA website. Finally, to become a member, as we know, right now there's no longer any chapter membership. Chapter memberships are automatically done with your global membership. You just have to pick a chapter of choice. So if you're not an IBA member, it'll do you very well to be an IBA member, and then just pick any chapter that you prefer that's close to you geographically, or that you want to make your home chapter. If you are in the South Florida region, please do pick the South Florida chapter, and you can make that selection in your personal profile once you log into IBA. If you are interested in volunteering, working with the chapter, please email the president at southflorida.iba.org. And you can follow us on our social handles on Twitter, on LinkedIn, the company page, and we also have a YouTube page. We will be sending out an email for this event with a survey, thanking you for your participation and telling us how we could do better. And then a link to the presenters approved slideshow, as well as a link to our YouTube page so that you can always watch this recording and just capture the moments again when you need it in the future. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Robert. We appreciate the time, and we hope that you all have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.